So after taking in that really beautiful jazzy arrangement by Uriah Bartal for Aleinu Leshabeach, we're going to continue by talking about how Marcia Falk herself speaks about her own liturgy and the deep ideas behind it. Marcia Falk has many wonderful books that include her liturgical innovations. The Book of Blessings is perhaps the most famous one, and it has a lot of everyday blessings that are very beautifully crafted. She also has a Haggadah called Night of Beginnings, in which she looks at the traditional language that we use at the Seder table, but she also provides a lot of additions and alternatives and lots of creative riffs on that provoke a lot of interesting conversations about the symbology and the moral of the story. She also has a book for the High Holy Days called The Days Between, which really takes seriously the idea of Aseret Yemei Tshuva and what we need to do with them, and how we can use them to take this really deep moral inventory of where we are and really embrace doing better. And we have Inner East, which is a really fabulous book that includes not only blessings, but also Marcia's beautiful landscape paintings. I'm sharing some of those paintings in these lecturettes, and you can see not only the gift of paint and the really love of the real love of nature that shines through them, but also the fact that Marcia Falk is an avid swimmer, and she really does love the water a lot. Um, let's hear it from Marcia Falk in her own words. So here she is talking about the importance of inclusive prayer language. When choosing new metaphors for my blessings, I try to confront the full extent of our liturgical idolatry. It is not just the exclusive maleness of our God language that needs correction, but its anthropocentrism in all its ramifications. For as long as we image divinity exclusively as a person, whether female or male, we tend to forget that human beings are not the sole, not even the primary life-bearing creatures on the planet. We allow our intelligence and our unique linguistic capabilities to deceive us into believing that we are godlier than the rest of creation. And in so doing, we neglect the real responsibility attendant upon the gift of human consciousness to care for Earth in ways that respect all human and non-human life upon it. For this reason, when I compose my blessings, I draw my metaphors not just from the human realm, but from all aspects of the creation, as did the biblical poets, who created the metaphors Tzur Israel, Rock of Israel, and Etz Chaim, Tree of Life, both of which phrases were adopted by later liturgists for prayers that eventually became part of synagogue services. I try to choose words whose meanings will expand in context, opening in more than a single direction, recognizing that no matter how resonant my language, any image I choose or create will necessarily be limited. I try to use theological metaphors that connect to the particular occasions being marked. I also try to draw inspiration from the traditional versions of the blessings, when they exist, using their expression of occasions as stimulus to my own kavanah, spiritual focus. For example, Al haaretz ve'al hamazon, for the earth and for nourishment, is taken from the traditional blessing. I wanted to use this phrase because, like the phrase hamotzi lechem min haaretz in the blessing over bread, it makes an important connection between the earth and our food. Although, in the context of the traditional blessing of the traditional after the meal, the word aretz, earth or land, seems to refer specifically to the land of Israel. Nevertheless, the echo of the larger meaning is certainly there. And I like the idea of thematically linking the blessing before the meal with the blessing after the meal so that the meal itself becomes part of an extended spiritual as well as physical act. So again, not only inclusivity, but also the palpable embodiment of what the blessing means. Here's Marcia talking about one of the more interesting, innovative, and also controversial aspects of her blessings and liturgy. And that's the idea that she's trying to transcend personification. And by doing that, that is the kind of like the deep, more inclusive feminism that she thinks about, is kind of like breaking free of the gender binary completely. And here's how she explains why the personification is limited. The traditional Hebrew blessings with which Jews today are most familiar have all essentially the same form. They consist of two parts: the opening address of divinity as that which is blessed, and a phrase or phrases varying in length and complexity which relate to the specific occasion of the blessing. Thus, for example, the blessing over bread reads, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the world, who brings forth bread from the earth. It is in the latter halves of the blessings that the Hebrew poetic imagination has flourished. Here, the liturgists have explored with verbal imagery a wide variety of life experiences. The first part of the traditional Hebrew blessing, on the other hand, is a strict formula. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, masculine singular, Lord our God, King of the world. And this formula never varies. No matter what occasion is being marked, no matter what words comprise the rest of the speech, to the traditional Jew, this formulaic opening is so absolute, so powerful, that once it is said, it must not go to waste. It must never be said in vain. So, for example, when I utter the blessing over the bread quoted above, I must immediately follow this speech act with the real act of eating bread. And without the formulaic address of divinity, an address referred to as Shem u'Malchut, name and sovereignty, the traditional Jew considers there to have been no blessing at all. Nothing that is that bears the same kind of spiritual authority. This notion of traditional blessings is partly what made Marcia Falk's blessings into such an interesting flashpoint in the conversation about Jewish liturgy. But we'll talk about that later. Let's see how she talks about the importance of liturgy that is centered on the human experience. And here she's talking about replacing Baruch atah with Nevarech. You will also notice that I've changed the opening of the blessing from Baruch atah, blessed are you, with both blessed and you specified as masculine singular. In Hebrew grammar, the second person is always gender specific, to the gender exclusive first person plural verb, Nevarech, let us bless. This change allowed me to open up the speech of the blessing form and freely use images of both genders. It also had the secondary effect of emphasizing the we who are blessing, thus placing responsibility back on the community of living human speakers. Lo hametim yehalelucha, said the psalmist. It's not the dead, but the living who will sing of God. As soon as I made this change to Nevarech, I realized that I had been uncomfortable with the passive blessed are you of the traditional blessing, not only because it is gender restrictive, but also because it is disempowering. With Nevarech, we reclaim our voices, take back the power of naming. But this is not just about human empowerment, this is also by using that empowerment to do the right thing. And here is Marcia Falk taking as an example of what justice-focused Judaism looks like, the idea of kashrut, which, as you would look at it, seems like a very technical requirement that might or might not have importance for secular Jews today. But here's how she looks at kashrut through a feminist lens. A feminist understanding of kashrut might lead us to see it as a system intended to remind us of the sanctity of animal life. And that, for this reason, we do not eat the blood, the symbolic life force of animals, and we do not seethe a kid in his mother's milk, the biblical basis for the separation of milk and dairy products, for that would be exceedingly callous. As feminist Jews, we want to claim these ideas as meaningful to us, particularly from a feminist perspective, recognizing, among other things, that the separation of milk and meat is actually based on an empathically perceived connection, the relationship between animal mother and child. Or we might want to advance the underlying principles further by establishing eating practices that respect animal life more fully. As we did this, we might consider the rabbinic belief that vegetarianism is a higher form of kashrut. In so doing, we would give Jewish historical connection to our feminist Jewish voice. I will mention that in much of vegan theory writing and animal rights literature, this idea of this perspective on feminism that has to do a lot also with factory animal farming is very, very prevalent. And also that this is some of the stuff that Rav Kook talks about in his book, Chazon HaTzimchonut VeHaShalom, the vision of vegetarianism and peace. She continues to talk about kashrut. We may choose, that is, to build into kashrut more awareness of other food practices, and more generally of food and the lack of food in the world. Human hunger is rightfully a concern of both feminists and Jews, and it would make sense to incorporate into kashrut a ritual intricately involved with what we eat and do not eat. Our concern that others do not have choices about what to eat. A start might be the creation of a special blessing over the preparation of food, as distinct from blessings over eating, a blessing that would make food preparation a more conscious and hallowed act. This blessing could articulate a promise to be fulfilled in actions at other moments to seek ways to ensure nourishment for all the world's inhabitants. So we're seeing some of these elements in the thinking about the liturgy rather than just those that shine through the liturgy itself. In the next little clip that I'm going to give you, you'll hear a beautiful musical composition based on Marcia Falk's Hanukkah blessing, and you'll hear how the music is enhancing the idea that we look at the candles as sparks in our soul. You'll see the inclusivity of the blessing, the way it uses metaphor, and also the way that it connects with the idea of the human experience of light in the darkness.